It was an evening like any other, quiet and unassuming. I'd just gotten home from work, completely drained after another long day of endless meetings and piles of reports. The house was cloaked in dim light, with soft music trickling through the air. I had no clue that, in just a few moments, everything I thought I knew about my life would shatter. Megan, my wife, had left her phone sitting on the kitchen counter. That was unusual. She never left it lying around, but I brushed it off, thinking nothing of it. It wasn't until I heard the familiar ping of a message notification that something stirred inside me. I wasn't the kind of guy to snoop through someone else's phone. Invading her privacy had never crossed my mind before. Trust was the cornerstone of our relationship, or at least that's what I believed. But that night, something shifted. Whether it was curiosity or that persistent, nagging doubt that had been lingering in the back of my mind for weeks, I couldn't say. Without thinking too much, I reached for her phone. Unlocking it was easy, we both knew each other's passwords. Back then, I thought of it as a symbol of trust, though now I wonder if it was just plain naivety. The message was short, but it hit me like a freight train. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow, love." My heart stopped cold. My mind spun, desperately trying to piece together what I'd just seen. My hands trembled as I scrolled through their conversation, hoping, praying, that it was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't. The thread was full of playful flirting, whispered plans for late-night meetings, and confessions of love. Each word felt like another knife digging deeper into my chest. I stood there in the dim light, frozen to the spot, as the horrifying truth sank in. Megan was cheating on me. The following morning, I watched her move around the kitchen like everything was perfectly normal. She smiled sweetly, kissed me on the cheek, and casually asked if I'd be working late that night. The sight of her so at ease, so unaware of what I knew, made my heart clench painfully in my chest. But I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Not yet. I needed answers first. I needed to understand how this could happen. Why she would betray me like this. That day felt like a blur. I walked around in a daze, replaying every memory, every interaction we'd had lately. Had the signs been there all along, and I just hadn't noticed? Those late nights at the office she'd mentioned? The emotional distance that had crept into our marriage? The questions piled up, and the pain grew heavier with every passing hour. I couldn't think straight. By that evening, I made up my mind. I couldn't deal with this alone. There was only one person I trusted enough to share something like this. My sister, Natalie. She'd always been my go-to when life fell apart. My anchor, the person who never judged, no matter how ugly things got. With trembling hands, I dialed her number. It barely rang before she picked up. "Hey, what's going on?" she asked immediately, a note of concern in her voice. Megan's been cheating on me?" I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of the words. The silence on her end stretched out for a moment before she finally spoke, her tone calm and cold in a way that caught me off guard. "We need to talk. Come over tomorrow." The next day, I made the drive to Natalie's house. Every mile I covered felt heavier, like the weight of what I discovered was pressing me deeper into the car seat. When I got there, she opened the door with a worried expression but didn't push me to start talking right away. We settled into her living room, and everything spilled out of me. The text messages, the deception, the heartbreak. She listened carefully, nodding along, her sharp eyes focused on me the entire time. "How do you feel?" she finally asked, her voice soft but carrying a weight behind it. "Angry, hurt, I don't know. Like an idiot, I guess," I admitted. "I thought we were happy." Natalie leaned forward, her face darkening with something I couldn't quite place. "You're not an idiot," she said firmly. "She's the one who threw your trust away. You have every right to be furious. But sitting here, drowning in all that pain, isn't going to fix this." I stared at her, thrown off. "What are you saying?" Her expression shifted slightly, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "I'm saying maybe it's time you took control of the situation. Maybe it's time to do something about it." I frowned, not quite following. "Like what?" The smile widened, and there was a glint in her eye that made me uneasy. "Revenge. The word hung in the air, foreign and strange to me. Revenge, I repeated, as though I didn't recognize the sound of it coming from my own mouth. I wasn't someone who went looking for payback. That just wasn't me. But something about the idea planted itself deep in my mind, like a seed I couldn't dig out. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice quieter now. Natalie leaned back in her chair, her arms crossing over her chest, and looked at me with a calm determination that was anything but reassuring. "You can't just let her get away with this," Natalie said, her voice sharp and unwavering. "She needs to know what it feels like, what it's like to be betrayed, humiliated, and torn apart. Sure, you could confront her directly, but where's the satisfaction in that? She'll cry, she'll apologize, and maybe she'll throw out some lame excuses. That's not enough. She needs to feel it, in a way she'll never forget." I shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her words pressing down on me. "I don't know, Natalie. That sounds extreme." Her expression softened, but her voice remained as pointed as ever. "She took something from you, don't you see? Your trust, your love, the life you thought you had together. And you're just going to let her walk away with all of that, untouched? I'm not saying you need to go overboard, but there are ways to make her understand the pain she's caused you. Just think about it." Her words followed me like a shadow for the rest of the night. As much as I wanted to dismiss the idea, there was no denying that she was right. Megan had taken something precious and irreplaceable from me. But revenge, it felt wrong. It felt dark, like a locked door I wasn't ready to open. Yet the longer I sat with it, the more the anger took root. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was about taking back my dignity, my sense of control. The next day, I found myself back at Natalie's place. This time, she didn't wait for me to say a word. "I've been thinking," she started, leaning in with an energy that was almost electric. "I have a plan. You might hate it, but I think it's exactly what you need." I hesitated, torn between doubt and curiosity. "What kind of plan?" She smirked, lowering her voice like we were sharing some great secret. "Step 1 is simple. We shake her world. Make her question everything." "How exactly do we do that?" I asked, leaning back, unsure where this was going. Her grin widened slightly. "You need to strip down your inhibitions. Quite literally, I'm afraid." I blinked at her, taken completely off guard. "What? Take off your clothes," she said, her tone a strange mix of teasing and seriousness. "Not here, obviously, but when the moment comes, you need to turn the tables. You have to make her see you in a way that'll haunt her forever, vulnerable yet unbreakable. Powerful in your rawness." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm serious," she replied, unflinching. "Look, when you confront her, she'll expect you to be broken. She'll expect tears, anger, maybe even begging for answers. But you're not going to give her that satisfaction. You're going to show her a side of you she's never seen before, completely raw, completely exposed. You'll let her see the damage she's done, but you'll do it your way, on your terms." As insane as it sounded, there was a strange logic in her words. I'd always been the steady one, the predictable one. What if, for once, I let go? What if I showed her a version of myself she wasn't prepared for? The more we talked, the more Natalie's plans started to take shape in my mind. "I don't know if I can pull this off," I admitted, the doubt still clinging to me. "You can," she said with absolute certainty. "And when you do, it'll leave her speechless. Trust me." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that taking control like this would help me pick up the broken pieces of my life. Over the next few days, I prepared myself mentally. Megan didn't have a clue what was brewing beneath the surface. I played my part perfectly, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while quietly rehearsing the moment in my head, over and over. The opportunity finally came one evening. Megan was sitting on our bed, casually scrolling through her phone like it was any other night. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I walked in. This was it. "Can we talk?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but deliberate. She looked up, surprised by the sudden shift in my tone. "Of course. What's going on?" I hesitated for a second, gathering every bit of courage I had. Then, without another word, I began unbuttoning my shirt. Her eyebrows knit together in confusion as she watched me. What are you doing?" she asked cautiously. I didn't answer right away. I just kept going. I pulled off my shirt, standing bare-chested in front of her, feeling more exposed than I ever had in my life. My voice, low and steady, cut through the silence. "I know, Megan," I said quietly. "I know about you and him." Her face turned pale in an instant, and her phone slipped from her fingers, landing on the bed with a dull thud. What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice shaking. "Don't," I said firmly, my voice hardening. "Don't lie to me. I saw the messages. I know everything." Her mouth opened as if to say something, but nothing came out. The silence was suffocating, hanging heavy in the room as I reached down and unbuckled my belt. "Stop," Megan whispered, her voice trembling now. "Please, what are you doing?" I locked eyes with her, my hands trembling as I slid off my pants. There I stood, completely exposed, nothing left to hide. "I'm showing you what you've destroyed," I said, my voice raw and heavy with emotion. "You didn't just cheat on me, Megan. You shattered everything I believed we had." Her eyes filled with tears, her lips quivering as she tried to hold herself together. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. "This is what's left of me," I continued, my voice thick, the words scraping their way out of my throat. "You took everything. My trust, my love, my life. And now I'm giving you one last look at what remains." Megan covered her mouth with her hand, sobs escaping her in quiet bursts, but I held my ground. This was my moment. For once, I was the one controlling the story, the same story she'd twisted behind my back. The room felt heavy, the silence broken only by her muffled cries as I stood there, stripped bare in every sense of the word. Vulnerable? Yes. But for the first time in weeks, I felt powerful. Megan had always been the one steering the ship, always holding the upper hand. But not anymore. The scales had tipped, and she could no longer hide behind the lies, the excuses, or the facade. "I trusted you," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I gave you everything, Megan, and you threw it all away for what? For some cheap thrill? Do you even understand what you've done?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I let her words hang in the air, empty and weightless. I knew she didn't have anything to say that could change what she'd done. Nothing could undo this betrayal. And for the first time, I realized I didn't care to hear her excuses. I wasn't looking for answers or understanding anymore. "You didn't just betray me," I said quietly, the words deliberate and final. "You betrayed us. You betrayed the life we built together. The man who would have done anything for you." I watched her crumble under the weight of her own guilt, her sobs breaking through the stillness of the room. But strangely, there was no satisfaction in seeing her like that, no relief. Just a quiet, unshakable resolve. I had to walk away, no matter how much it hurt, no matter how hard it would be. "I'm done," I said firmly, turning my back on her. My chest felt heavy with the finality of it, but there was no turning back. I deserve better than this. In that moment, something inside me shifted. It was subtle, like a chain breaking free. For the first time in a long time, I felt the faintest hint of freedom. I left the room without another word, Megan's sobs trailing behind me like a haunting echo. I stepped onto the porch, the cool night air wrapping around me like a balm. I stood there for a moment, letting it hit my skin, letting it remind me that I was still here, still breathing. As the weight of what I'd just done settled in, so did the clarity. I'd ended something that had once been everything to me. But as I stood there under the quiet night sky, I realized something. What we'd had was already broken, beyond repair. No amount of apologies could mend it. No promises could make it whole again. Megan's betrayal had poisoned the well, and the only way to save myself was to let go and walk away. The decision sat heavy in my chest, though. The future stretched ahead of me, unknown and uncertain. What would life even look like without her? Could I pick up the pieces, move on, and maybe, someday, learn to trust someone again? Those questions swirled in my mind, but oddly, they didn't terrify me the way they used to. There was something liberating in knowing I was no longer tied to the lies that had bound me for so long. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Natalie. How did it go? I stared at the words for a moment before typing out a reply. It's over. Her response was instant. Good. You did what you needed to do. I wasn't sure if I believed her yet, but deep down, I knew she was right. Something had ended tonight, and though it hurt, something new had quietly begun. The days that followed were a haze. Megan tried reaching out again and again. Her messages ranged from tearful apologies to desperate pleas for forgiveness. But I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. Every text from Megan felt like a desperate attempt to patch up something that was far too broken to fix. I moved into a hotel for a while, needing to escape the house and everything it represented. Each room there, each object, was a reminder of the life we'd built together, a life now stained with lies and betrayal. Staying would have felt like I was drowning. The hotel wasn't warm or welcoming. It was impersonal, cold even. But it was exactly what I needed, neutral ground. A place where nothing reminded me of her, where I could start sifting through the wreckage and try to figure out what came next. One evening, Natalie showed up unannounced. She brought dinner and a bottle of wine, simple comforts that only a sister could offer. We sat together in the cramped hotel room, eating and drinking in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us like a thick fog. You did the right thing, she said eventually, breaking the quiet. I looked at her, unsure. Did I? I asked, my voice heavy with doubt. It doesn't feel like a victory. It's not supposed to, she replied softly, her words measured. This isn't about winning. It's about reclaiming control of your life. She lost the right to be in it the moment she betrayed you. I nodded, but deep inside, I still felt hollow. Megan's betrayal had carved out a void in me, and even though I knew I'd made the right choice by walking away, the road ahead looked uncertain. A door had closed behind me, and I had no idea where the next one would lead. Days slipped into weeks, and slowly, the silence that had once been unbearable started to feel comforting. No more messages from Megan. No more lies. Just me alone with my thoughts. And in that quiet, I started to realize something unexpected. I was beginning to heal. Eventually, I returned to the house. It wasn't home anymore, though. Every room, every object, held echoes of the life we'd shared. A life I'd thought was built on trust, only to watch it crumble. I began packing up Megan's things, carefully boxing everything up and leaving it by the door. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd moved beyond that. At this point, I just needed to be free from her presence, from the memories that still clung to the walls and corners of the house like a lingering shadow. Natalie visited often. She checked on me, made sure I wasn't slipping into that dark place grief can sometimes pull you into. Her support was a lifeline, but I knew the journey of healing was mine alone to walk. She'd helped me face the truth and take the first steps, but rebuilding my life was up to me now. One night, I sat in the living room, staring at the last box of Megan's things. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there, looking at it, letting everything sink in. And then it hit me. For the first time since I'd discovered her affair, I felt something new, something like closure. This chapter of my life was coming to an end, and the emptiness I'd been carrying around started to feel different. Felt like possibility. With a deep breath, I closed the box, stood up, and placed it by the door. Tomorrow I'd be free. The next morning I called Megan. My voice was steady, calm in a way it hadn't been in weeks. You can come pick up your things, I said. She hesitated on the other end of the line, her voice small. Okay, I'll come by this afternoon. When she showed up later that day, there was no shouting, no accusations, no dramatic confrontation. I stood in the doorway, watching her take in the sight of the boxes lined up neatly by the door. The silence between us was thick, heavy with all the things we'd left unsaid. Her eyes flickered with understanding. She knew this was the end. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice so faint I almost didn't hear it. I nodded, but I didn't say anything. I'd heard her apologies before, and I believed she meant it. But that didn't matter now. Words couldn't undo what had been done. Some things can't be repaired. She took a small step forward, like she might reach out to me, but stopped herself. Instead, she exhaled shakily, her shoulders slumping. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "I never wanted any of this to happen." I looked at her, my expression calm but firm. "But it did, Megan," I said quietly. "And now we both have to live with that." She blinked back tears, her face etched with regret. With a small nod, she turned and began loading the boxes into her car. I stood in the doorway and watched her go. It felt like the closing of a book, one that had held both the best and worst chapters of my life. I stood at the doorway, watching her car disappear down the street, a strange mix of relief and finality settling over me. When the last box was loaded and she was truly gone, I closed the door with a sense of purpose. For the first time in what felt like forever, I knew I could finally start to move forward. The weight of her presence, the lingering ghost of our broken marriage, had lifted. The house felt different now. Lighter, quieter, emptier. But it was the kind of emptiness I needed, necessary cleansing. That final goodbye hadn't been a battle. There were no heated words, no bitterness left to throw around. It was just a quiet understanding that our story had come to its final page, and now it was up to me to write a new one on my own. The days that followed were still, like the calm after a storm. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with the silence, but slowly, I began to embrace it. Megan's absence, and everything we had built and lost together, created a space in my life. A blank canvas I hadn't realized I needed. I started finding comfort in the simple things again, things I hadn't made time for in years. Early morning runs that left my lungs burning but my mind clear. Cooking meals just for me, taking the time to actually enjoy the process. Sitting with a book, completely lost in its pages, letting the world beyond the window blur and fade away. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself, but it was mine. That, I realized, was enough. Natalie didn't check in as often now. She still called from time to time, but her visits were fewer, her voice less worried. She knew I was finding my footing again. Natalie had been my guide through the darkest parts of this journey, a steady presence when I'd felt like I was drowning. But she didn't need to hold my hand anymore. She'd helped me take back my life, and I knew I'd always owe her for that. One evening, I sat on the porch, a glass of wine in my hand, and watched as the sky turned gold and orange with the setting sun. A deep sense of calm washed over me, one I hadn't felt in a long time. The pain was still there, of course, like a faint scar that lingered, but it had softened into something manageable. It no longer consumed me. I thought about Megan then. I thought about the years we'd shared, the promises we'd made, and the choices she'd ultimately thrown away. Her betrayal had felt like it shattered me at first, a wound so deep I didn't think I could recover. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'd faced the pain head-on, stripped myself of everything I'd been hiding behind, and somehow come out stronger on the other side. In that quiet moment, it hit me. This wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something new. The uncertainty that used to terrify me now felt like possibility. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I lifted my glass, letting the warmth of the wine settle in my chest, and made a silent toast to myself, to survival, to healing, to the man I had fought to become. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky faded into darkness, I sat there, feeling lighter, clearer, and ready to see what lay ahead.